Today we're going to talk about communication along the Underground Railroad. In Ohio, there are multiple Underground Railroad museums that cover all the unseen facts about it. We discovered that slaves used a secret type of language using quilts with symbols on them.
These symbols they used meant different things, like a symbol of danger or a symbol of freedom. When we were researching, we discovered that a woman named Harriet Tubman escaped slavery and founded the Underground Railroad. She helped thousands of enslaved Americans escape from slavery, rights of freedom through the Underground Railroad. How we constructed our research. When we first discovered our topic, the first thing we did was look up what the Underground Railroad was and how it worked. With that knowledge we found, we added it to our notes, and then we went to the next research topic. The second thing we did was researched any people who escaped and who founded the Underground Railroad. We discovered more than 100,000 people escaped slavery through the Underground Railroad, and Harriet Tubman, who escaped slavery, founded the Underground Railroad. The third thing we researched was what states connected to the Underground Railroad. We discovered that the Underground Railroad was connected to 14 northern states that led up to Canada with their freedom started. The last thing we researched was any journals from enslaved people and their point of view in the Underground Railroad. We discovered that more than half of the people that went in the Underground Railroad were writing journals about their experience. How we created our documentary. We created a documentary video for this year's History Day project. We chose this format because we thought it would be the best way to present our research on how slaves communicated along the Underground Railroad. When we first began to discuss our video, we decided that we would include a lot about the symbols sewn onto the quilt. That night, we took 3 symbols and researched what their meaning was. When we then had to research them if anyone had journals of their experience along the way.
History of slavery in the United States. Slavery first started in the 13 colonies in 1619 when immigrants from England came to America. The slaves were transported from Africa on ships with poor conditions. Slaves were crammed into small rooms and chained together. The only exercise they got was when they were forced to dance. There wasn't enough food for all the people on the ship, and most food was covered in fleas. Most slaves worked on sugar or tobacco farms. Many also picked cotton or worked in the swamp and plantations.
When did the Underground Railroad start? Underground Railroad began in the late 1700s after the escape of Harriet Tubman, who founded the Underground Railroad. When it was about the 1850s, about 100,000 enslaved Africans escaped along this passage. The Underground Railroad never stopped until after the Civil War in 1865. The war started because the northern states did not want slavery, but the southern states did.
Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was born into slavery in the U.S. in 1819. At the age of 30, she escaped into Canada. She made many missions back to America to rescue slaves and eventually began the Underground Railroad. She was known as the Moses of slaves for her great works. Harriet was also asked to beat a slave who tried to escape, which ultimately led towards her trying to escape.
Songs and journals from the Underground Railroad. Follow the Drinking Gourd was a famous song used by slaves. Escaping slaves sung this to help them find their path to freedom. Go Down Moses was another famous song written by Harriet Tubman. She sang this song to sing the people that she was near and would help anyone who wanted to escape. Another song was titled Song of the Free, and it was written to display what African Americans were willing to go through to be free and even death. Harriet Tubman wrote about her journey in her journal to help her on future trips.
Why was it called the Underground Railroad? It wasn't actually an Underground Railroad, but it got its name because people who used this passage disappeared from society as if they had actually gone underground. After the fugitive slaves escaped on that road, no trace of them could be found.
How did the Underground Railroad work? Late at night, any slave who wished to use this passage snuck out. The first night, they would run till they reached the first safe house. In the safe house, freed Americans would hide the slaves in a secret room. They would bypass the next day in the safe house. Once given the signal that it was time to leave, they would grab their bags and head to the next safe house. Sometimes while traveling overnight, they would see a drunkard's path on a quilt This meant that there were slave hunters nearby and they needed to hide. They would go from safe house to safe house every night until they reached the free land.
Which of the states had slavery? Most of the middle colony states had slaves in the 1700s. These states included Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The states that supported slavery were known as the slave states. The reason these states wanted slavery is because they owned big plantations and farms, and they were too hard to tend. Most of the Underground Railroad extended throughout the Northwest Territory and all the way up.
How slaves got into America. First, when the slaves are born in Africa, they spend their childhood in parts of Middle East and other parts of northeastern Africa. Then, they are sold into slavery when they go to the west coast of Africa, where they are being shipped along with hundreds of other slaves into America. Then, when they arrive to America, their new slave owners make them work in their plantations, smaller farms, and other important jobs. In order to complete the slave trade, the colonists/Americans gave the people in Africa wine, guns, animals, and sugar. Why the Underground Railroad was important. In the 1700s, when slaves first started coming into the U.S., it weakened America. It weakened America by giving people in the South more money and more control of the land around them, but all the manpower to the slaves. This meant that the people around the slave owners were losing their farmland because the slave owners had more power and more money than them. When Harriet Tubman created the Underground Railroad, many slaves took advantage of this chance to escape. The Underground Railroad is important because when the slave owners lost all their slaves, they began to lose their wealth, giving the small farm owners a chance to survive. This ultimately led to America becoming a strong, united nation.
The communication quilts. The first symbol was the monkey's wrench. This meant get ready, gather the tools you'll need to build shelter, navigate the journey, or defend yourself along the way. The second symbol was crossroads. This meant keep going and travel to the crossroads in Cleveland, Ohio, nicknamed Hope. This vibrant Underground Railroad station was the last stop where the slaves would brought a boat to Canada. The third symbol was the log cabin. This meant that you have reached a safe house. Congratulations, you have found new friends who are friends of slaves. The fourth symbol is bow ties. This meant you are looking pretty tattered. To disguise yourself as a freed slave, you'll need a change of clothes. The bow ties quilt block is a code to tell you someone will bring you nicer clothing. The fifth symbol is the flying geese. This meant follow the migrating geese north to Canada into freedom. The sixth symbol is the drunkard's path. This meant go back one space. The quilt block is a sign that slave hunters are near. Double back to elude them immediately. The seventh symbol is the North Star. This meant look to the skies to help you navigate the way. Follow the North Star to Canada. The last symbol is tumbling blocks. This meant the time has come to box up your belongings. Your escape.
Conclusion of the Underground Railroad. Although slavery may not seem to fit this year's theme of communication, we realized the Underground Railroad would. The Underground Railroad had communication both between slave owners and slave hunters, slaves and citizens that wanted to help them escape.
Slave owners could contact the hunters when the nearest slave come. They then would search the woods and the houses near them for any escaping slaves. Any citizens that wanted to help the slaves could sew symbols on quilts that only them or the slaves knew the meaning to. Slaves would go from safe house to safe house overnight. While they were traveling from one safe house to another, the owner of the old house would inform the next safe house owner that they were on their way.